start? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's okay? Yeah. Okay. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Ahsan Mahmaod Khan. I'm from Los Angeles. And somebody who came up with this program decided to play a pretty mean trick, and they asked me to follow respected Habib Shafiq Sahib. So anybody who has to follow a presentation like that is not, he has a tall order in front of him. And the topic that he discussed and the energy that he brought into the topic, I won't be able to deliver to that extent. But I'm here to talk to you about my early years as being a member of Ansarullah. A respected Sadr Ansar, Imran Haysab, had reached out to me a couple of months ago, and he asked me to share my experiences. And so I'll try to do so in any way that I can. Please stop me, and if you have something that you want to say or any observation or any reflection, please do so. Just raise your hand. I think everybody would love to hear what you have to say, and if you want to come to the microphone, you can. So we'll make it sort of informal. So in reflecting on this topic, I thought about different aspects of my journey to age 40, and then my first 3 years in Ansarullah. I'm 43 years old. And my thought process is focused on these three ideas. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to show three pictures here. The first picture is a picture of a fetus in the womb. The second picture is a boiling pot of water. And the third picture is an iconic mountaintop in California. And I hope to illustrate this journey to Ansarullah in the first 3 years of Ansarullah through these three pictures. So we'll go to, and I thank respected Sadr Kentucky Sahib for advancing the slides for me. The clicker wasn't working. So the age 40. Now, age 40 is a milestone, not just for us as Ahmadis or not just for Muslims, but for man, for woman. It's a significant age. Some people call it a midlife crisis. Some people call it a stepping stone. And let's look at what thinkers and philosophers have said about the age of 40. W.B. Pitkin said that life begins at 40, and we've heard that phrase many times. Carl Jung, a philosopher, said, life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research. Ann Landers said that at age 20, we worry about what others think of us. At 40, we don't care what they think of us. And at 60, we discover that they haven't been thinking of us at all. Benjamin Franklin said, at 20 years of age, the will reigns. At 30, the wit. And at 40, the judgment. Very profound. Victor Hugo, famous author, he said 40 is the old age of youth, 50 is the youth of old age. And then finally, another comment, the first 40 years of life give us the text, and the next 30 supply the commentary. And we can go to the next slide. But what does our faith tell us about the age of 40? And we are so blessed to be Muslims. We are so blessed to be the recipients of that book that was sent to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which Allah Ta'ala himself discusses the significance of the age of 40. And he says, and we have enjoined on man to be good to his parents. His mother bears him with pain and brings him forth with pain. And the bearing of him and his weaning takes 30 months, till when he attains full maturity and reaches the age of 40 years, he says, my Lord, grant me the power that I may be grateful for thy favor which thou hast bestowed upon me and upon my parents, and that I may do such good works as may please thee, and make my seed righteous for me. I do turn to thee, and truly I am of those who submit to thee, unquote. Amen. Next slide. So the specific Arabic phrase or word that is used is balagha ashuddha, and it means what is attained when he has attained his age of full strength. And I'll get to that verse, when he has attained his age of full strength. And this shows up in 3 different verses in the Holy Quran. So next slide. So the The Promised Messiah ﷺ wrote his masterpiece book. Among his many masterpieces was Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam. And in here, he addresses in a very beautiful philosophical way the age of 40. And this begins our analogy to these photos that I showed. And that's the photo of the fetus in the womb. And we can go to the next slide. And Masih Maud al-Islam illustrates beautifully the significance of age of 40 by giving us the analogy of the fetus in the womb. And I'll read what he says. It's very, very important. I'm sure many of you have read this. But think about these things when you think about your own life. Masih Maud al-Islam writes, here it would be useful to mention that the human fetus shows signs of life almost 4 months and 10 days after its conception. That is, at the intermediate stage of its existence in the womb. The same laws of nature that cause the fetus to evolve from the vegetative to the animal state are also operative in spiritual birth. In other words, just as a fetus spends half the span of his existence in the privacy of the womb and then starts showing signs of animation and life, the same condition obtains in the birth of spiritual life as well. The better part of a person's life before the onset of senility can be measured at approximately 80 years, half of which is 40. Here, the number 40 correlates with the first 4 months the fetus spends in the womb prior to its first physical movements. Experience tells us that when man has lived half his productive life, the first 40 years, which bear a strong likeness to the first 4 months of a fetus's existence, his soul then awakens and shows nascent signs of spiritual life, provided he is blessed with a pure disposition. So Masih Maud al-Islam, not a scientist, but gifted with an insight that very few have ever been blessed with, only prophets. He shared this insight of the fetus, not just scientifically, but a beautiful analogy of what it means to us spiritually. That age of 40 is birth, spiritual birth. You can go to the next slide. So Masih Maud al-Islam further writes here, as man approaches 40, he starts shedding the vagaries of his youth. Now think about your own life when you hear this. As man approaches 40, he starts shedding the vagaries of his youth and ruefully looks back at many of his follies from which his counselors had failed to dissuade him. The ebullience of his youth naturally begins to subside, for his physical condition declines with advancing age. The rebellious blood is no longer there, nor is there any more physical vitality and recklessness of youth. The time of deterioration and decay approaches fast. At this stage, he also witnesses the passing away of his elders and even the untimely death of younger people whose loss leaves him stricken with grief. His parents, too, are probably no more, and the world begins to betray its transience in a number of ways. It is as if God places before him a mirror and says, look, this is the reality of life of which you are so fond. It is then that he recalls his past mistakes with regret and undergoes a radical transformation, ushering in a new life, provided he is well-meaning by nature and is one of those upon whom God has summoned. And we can go to the next slide. So, Promised Messiah al-Islam continues to say, thus God has made it clear in this verse that the 40th year is a blessing for those who are righteous, and it is then that the Spirit of truth awakens them. Most of God's prophets were raised in the 40th year of their lives. For instance, our Lord and Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, was also raised for the reformation of mankind in his 40th year. How beautiful a description, the analogy of the fetus and the age of 40. Again, spiritual birth. And when you look at Islamic history, as Masih Maud al-Islam points out, the Holy Prophet ﷺ's first revelation was at the age of 40 in the cave of Hira. The Promised Messiah al-Islam was only 41 when his father passed away, and Allah Ta'ala revealed to him, Allah sallahu bikafin abduhu, is not Allah sufficient for his servant. And then, of course, that brings us here, this Ijtima. The Ansarullah Ijtima, Majlis Ansarullah, was established by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu for men age 40, and most fittingly, it was founded in 1940. So now let's look at, next slide, what Khalifatul Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, the founder of Majlis Ansarullah, why did he pick the age of 40? And he writes this. This is in Sabilur Rashad, Path to Enlightenment, speeches by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani pertaining to Ansarullah. At the time when Ansarullah was established, he gave many speeches. And he says, I fixed 40 years of age for Ansarullah. The reason was that I wanted to have such energetic persons to accomplish tasks that are in a youthful period of life and have energy to carry out sufficient work. And there also are such people available who have excellent minds and who can carry out the supervision of people with full attention. So this goes to this concept of spiritual rebirth, but also a physical rebirth. You know, many of us who, when we get to that age 35, 36, 37, we don't want to talk about Ansarullah. We're like, no, don't remind me. And then when we hit age 40, people say, oh, it's going to go downhill physically. But Hazrat Muslimah radiyallahu anhu said, no, compared to your peers, you're going to be the most energetic in the batch. So here you are, somebody who is a senior in Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya. Now all of a sudden, you're the youthful face of Ansarullah. And this is something I'll talk about in my own experience. And next slide goes to the second picture that I showed you, and that's the boiling pot of water. Again, the brilliance of Hazrat Muslimah radiyallahu anhu using a physics analogy to explain what happens to us when we're at the age of 40. Hazrat Muslimah writes, this is a manifestation of God's power, that a time comes over man that his physical powers grow, while his intellectual powers are still hidden. I do not say that they regress. Mental powers do not regress, but stay behind a curtain. This is the period of age between 25 and 40. And another period comes after that when the body does not have the ability to grow, but the level it has reached is maintained. The condition of the ones above 40 is that of a liquid at a state that after the initiation of boiling, the boiling has not settled, though it has stopped boiling. That is the condition of the ones above 40, that though the boiling has stopped, but its crest does not diminish. This is the period in which generally Allah raises prophets for the reformation of the public. This is the period of balagha ashuddha. Powers reach their crests, but the boiling point is eliminated. Next time you boil a cup of water, just look at that. Just look at the state of the water. The kinetic energy builds up and the bubbles are forming, and then it reaches a point of boiling. And right before the temperature starts to drop, after it reaches its boiling point and the bubbles start to go away, there is this moment, this energetic moment, when the boiling is continuing, but the temperature is not rising. Balagha Shuddha, it's like this capturing this power. And if you look at the next slide, or actually, no, you can stay on that slide. Hazrat Muslimah says that this is when prophethood was given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, and so many others who've reached that stage of enlightenment. So Masih Maud alayhi salam explained the fetus and how the fetus is an analogy for us, how you are helpless, and then all of a sudden you are given life at 4 months and a week or so. And then Hazrat Muslimah alayhi salam radiyallahu anhu explains to us that that moment when the spiritual energy has reached its crest is at 40. And that is why Majlis Ansarullah starts at the age of 40. And then this brings us to the last picture. Can anybody tell me, go back one? Can anybody tell me, go back to the first picture, what mountaintop that is? I'm sure people know her. Half Dome, I heard. Yes, so this is in Yosemite, California. How many have been to Yosemite? Just raise your hand. Okay, not many here. Okay. So in Yosemite, there's many iconic peaks, and this peak is called Half Dome. It's a very like majestic slab of granite. There's nothing really like it on Earth. On one side is a flat face that goes several thousand feet up in the air, and then there's a path in the back that you can actually hike. So when I turned age 40 in 2016, that was going to be my last Ijtima of Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya. And it so happened that that Ijtima was going to take place in Yosemite. So it was sort of my internal dream or bucket list, you can call it, or something, that I wanted to get to the top of that Half Dome. And a couple of my colleagues at work had hiked Half Dome, and a couple of my friends in Majlis Ansarullah, including Zahid Mian Saab, our Qaid Finance, and Salman Khalid Saab, who's sitting in the audience here, who also was at the same state as me. It was his last Ijtima, right? Salman Bhai, is your last Ijtima? And Salman Bhai is the fittest of all of us. He had the idea that let's all collectively make an effort to train, and let's get to the top of that peak on the occasion of Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya's Ijtima, and that would be our last few moments together as members of Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya. So we began training. Salman Khalid Bhai actually put together some videos showing us how to train. We watched those videos. We ran, we went to local stores and figured out how to do proper hiking. We got the right shoes, we got the right clothing. It's about a 14, 15-hour round trip hike. Very, very strenuous, about 13 miles round trip. You have to be in really good shape. And what's interesting is that you can't just go there and hike it. You have to actually apply for it, and it's a lottery. So what we decided is that there were about maybe 3 dozen, I think 18 of us, who finally agreed that we would do this hike. And we all applied for the lottery at the same time. And one lottery pass gives you 6 passes. So one lottery gives you 6 passes if you get it. So we just needed 3. We needed 3 out of 18 people to win that lottery, and then all of us could go on this hike. And we all registered the same morning, and we sent the results in, and lo and behold, what came back were 3. So out of 18, we got 3 hits, and that's how many we needed. We needed 18. So then we're thinking, okay, maybe there's something behind this. Maybe Allah Ta'ala wants us to do this. And so Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya Ijtima comes, and on the last day, we decided that our goal will be to take that hike on a Sunday morning. Salman Bhai, he gathered everybody. We did a collective dua. You can go to the next photo. After Fajr, and we decided that we would take the hike immediately after Fajr, and that's a group photo of us going on that hike. And so you can go to the next slide. So the first 3-4 miles of the hike are very steep. You go through these 3 beautiful levels of waterfalls, actually 2, but it's very, very strenuous, but you have a lot of energy. You're just kind of really, really motivated. And that, to me, was our moment as Majlis Atfal al-Ahmadiyya. And in fact, this whole journey from the ground, sea level, to the very top was life's journey in a metaphor. And I realized this when I finally got back down. So when you're youthful, when you're Atfal al-Ahmadiyya, you have so much energy, but you have reckless energy. Some of us were going too fast up there. Some of us, including me, were slipping. Some of us were a little bit naive. We didn't know our bearings very well. We got a little bit too confident, almost overconfident, which sounds like a lot of people you might know who are 18. You meet them at the masjid and they feel like they can conquer the world. I was sort of like that too. But you kind of learn the hard way that you're going to slip as you go. So as we're going through those first 3-4 miles, some of us kind of, we got a little bit too aggressive and active, and some of us got a little hurt, but we kept marching on. You can go to the next slide. And then you get to the Misty Trail. Is that what it's called, Salman? Yeah, and it's a beautiful trail full of mist, and you climb there, and then you kind of see at that point your target. You can see Half Dome in the distance for the first time. And so this is when you kind of shed that over-exuberance, and then you kind of see a goal in sight. And you're like, okay, let me sort of get my hike together, let me get my life together. And what is that? That's sort of like when you've graduated high school and you're into college, you're like, okay, I need to start focusing. And that's what we were doing at that point. The group got less rowdy, and we started focusing, saying, okay, we can kind of see our goal, but we're also getting a little bit tired, some of us more than others. But we crossed the first couple of milestones. Okay, then we can go to the next slide. And then there's Half Dome in the distance, and now it's looking a little daunting at this point. So now we're like, okay, yeah, we can do this, we've trained, but then as you get closer, you realize that thing is really, really high up there. And that too is a moment we all come in our life. We've all been there, where now you start doubting that you can get to your goal, whether it's in college or post-grad or whatever it is. Should you start a family? Should you get married? Should you not get married? Should you put your name in the Rishtanata database, which will be a talk for another time? And you have those hesitancies that should you do that? And at that point, some of my colleagues, Salman Bhai and a few others, they motivated those of us who are doubting that we can do this, saying, no, you can trudge on, and we did. So camaraderie, brotherhood is very important. You hear the concept of brotherhood in Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya all the time. And that happens in your mid-20s, late 20s, and we can keep going. So now we get to the base of the mountain, and this is where one of us decided they can't do it. One of my friends from LA, he looked at that last push on Half Dome, which is basically a slippery slab of granite. It's at about a 45-degree angle. You don't have any chains, you just have these cables that you need to hang on to. And we all knew that this was going to be that one mental hurdle, not so much a physical hurdle. And so of the 18, one of us, he backed out and said, I can't do this. And then the rest of us, me especially, I started having my doubts that should I even be doing this? I wanted to text my wife, but I couldn't because there's no Wi-Fi. So I asked Salman Bhai to be behind me in case I kind of slipped to grab me. And he was confident. Salman Bhai, that was your first hike as well? First time? Yeah, it was your first time. So, but he had a lot more confidence than I did. And we started to do this last climb. Now, this last climb is what I went through 5, 6, 7 years ago. Many of my friends in in Khudam Ahmadiyya went through this. And that is, you're sort of married, you have a good job, you get complacent, you kind of want to stay under the radar, you want to coast along, you felt like you've done all of the hike, you should be rewarded for just kind of relaxing, resting, enjoying the scenery, right? You hear that a lot, just kind of coast along. But you haven't really reached your goal. And what is that goal? It's the goal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Holy Quran. It's the goal that Masih Maud al-Islam beautifully wrote in Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam. And it's the goal that has brought us here today. Why Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu set the age of 40. It's to get to that peak. And you can't get to that peak until you shed all of your fears, all of your reservations, and you trust that what's going to be up there is going to be really, really worth it. And so we did that last push. And it was really an unforgettable experience for those of us who did it. You know, we'll never forget going up that slab, looking back, looking down, realizing how hard you are, questioning your decision. And then you finally make it over, and you can go to the next slide. And then you're in this beautiful, you feel like you're on the moon or some other planet. There's no plant life, there's no vegetation. It was fairly warm on the ground, but it's cold up there. You're exhausted, tired, dehydrated. You know, you can only carry so much water with you, and you have to conserve your water because there's no vending machines, there's no people giving you water. And remember, once you get to the top, you're only at age 40. What do you do after that? You have to get back to where you came from, right? And so we were up there eating oranges. We were just kind of relaxing. And that's sort of what I went through when I hit age 40 with Salman Bhai and Zahid Mian and many others, is that we collectively reflected on our journey in Khudam al-Ahmadiyya. And that was a very beautiful moment because we felt like we went through Khudam al-Ahmadiyya together. And if you do this in isolation, it's very hard for you to embrace Ansarullah. But if you're doing it with a group of people with camaraderie, you realize that you're going into something with many, many other people. And that camaraderie that we had over there was unforgettable. In fact, you can go to the next slide. That's my friend doing azan at the top. We got out our compass and we figured out where the Qibla was, and we decided this is Zohar time and we should offer our salat. You can go to the next slide. And then that's the view of the scenery from the top. There's actually a whole video that was made about this. And that's Salman Bhai and I think Khalid Bhai? Is that Khalid Bhai? Or who was with us? I can't really tell in the picture. We're holding up the flag of Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya when we got to the top. Okay, so we get to the top. Now, I thought that the hardest part was, climbing that last slab of granite, really thinking I'm risking my life. And I finally get to the top. I'm like, this was really, really worth it. We were up there for about an hour. We really enjoyed it. But then when we had to come back down and I went to that descent, that's when I freaked out. Because that's when you realize that you now have to go downhill through that same 45-degree granite, slippery granite. And that's me right now at 42, 43 years old. Like, there is so much expectation on me. Masih Maud al-Islam has written it. Hazrat Muslim Maud has written it. The expectation is there now on all of us that, okay, you showed your physical prowess. You've gotten to the top. But now you've reached that balagha shuddha. You've captured that spiritual energy. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to let it boil away and dampen out? Or are you going to tap into that energy and becoming a meaningful steward of Majlis Ansarullah? And that's the reason why Sadr Sahab had requested me to give this talk. It's for those of you who are going through what I'm going through now, those of you in the audience who are in Saff Dom, the first 5, 7 years of Ansarullah, 10 years, 15 years, whatever's the definition, that right now you're going through that downhill slab. There's going to be expectations put on you. You're going to start doubting yourself. You're going to say, should I go to that general meeting, Ansar general meeting? That's, an old person's club. They drink chai and they just talk about these scenarios and they laugh and they joke. And what am I going to do over there? I could hang out with my friends. But no, Hazrat Muslim Maud has told you that you're a member of Ansarullah not at 39 or 43. It starts at 40. And so it's very important for us to understand that this was written in us. It's written in our DNA. It's written in our soul that this is what we do at age 40, is that we become stewards of Majlis Ansarullah. So going down that hill was very, very tough, but one interesting aspect is we learned a lot about our technique of going up, and we used that to come down. So we kind of already knew the path that we took. So you gain so much experience in your relationships as a member of Atfal and Khuddam, and you use those experiences in Ansarullah. And even now, when I have friends who go on these trips, I have something to share with them. I have something to tell them that, look, when you go through Little Yosemite Village, you should stop at this river, get a filter, and you should get this water, and that way you don't have to use your own water. Or that when you get to the base of Saff Dom at the very top, leave your backpack down. It's unneeded weight, and just go without the backpack. These are things that I learned along the way that nobody told us, but now I can share it with others. So the other thing you're responsible for as a member of Ansarullah is to bring the 30-year-olds, the 35-year-olds, the 38-year-olds into Ansarullah with vigor, with energy, with something to look forward to. And that's the complacency that we're seeing right now, all across the country. When you look at this gap, the age group of 30 to 40, in many majalis, in many jamaats, you see that they're not coming to the masjid as frequently. They're very busy in their lives, and we understand that people get busy. But this is a responsibility you have as a member of Ansarullah, a new member, is to bring those people up. Bring those people up who aren't showing up to the masjid. So we can go to the next slide. So there's a lot of life lessons, as I talked about, life goals, the training that we talked about, the ascent, we start feeling confident and aggressive, the valley, so in the middle of the hike, there's this lull where you're just kind of walking, and that's the complacency. Then you get to the top, the achievement, the relief, but then realizing that you're only halfway there. And then the descent, in which you use what you learn, the patience, the pain, the persistence, and then the lessons learned and perspective. We can go to the next slide. So what do I think Majlis Ansarullah represents? This is my third Ijtima, and I've enjoyed every Ijtima that we've had. Each one has become bigger and better. And why? Because of the energy, camaraderie, and spirit. I feel the energy is much more in the Ansar Ijtimas, honestly, than the Khuddam Ijtimas. Although Khuddam Ijtimas are epic, right? They're amazing. But there's an energy level that you see here that's very, very much unmatched. And so there's many who don't come to the Ijtima. So again, it's our job, all of our jobs, to go home and tell our brothers who have missed out on the Ijtima the energy and the spirit that they enjoyed here. What I've really enjoyed about being a member of Ansarullah is that you have elders among the elders. So technically, we're elders, right? Face it, once you age 40, kids are going to start calling you uncle or sahib or whatever. You're an elder. That's just the reality. But people like me are elders, and then there's people on my right side who are the buzurg, the elders. And you don't appreciate what an elder means until you spend time in the company of the people who are sitting on the chairs. This is my own experience. So the other message I have for you is that if you're in a local majlis, spend time with the elders. It's amazing how much you'll learn. In fact, I guarantee you that if you spend just 15 minutes with an elder, somebody, 70, 75, or even older, you're going to learn something new. He's going to teach you something that you didn't know. But we don't do that enough, I feel. And it's such a beautiful system that Hazrat Muslim Islam set up with Ansarullah. He could have said it at 50 or 60, but he's giving the opportunity for the youthful elders among us to still be in a learning phase. And that learning happens by spending time with the elders among the elders. There's organizational power. That goes without saying. Ahmadiyyat is the most organized structure in the world, in my opinion. Lajna, Atfal, Nasrat, Khuddam, and of course Ansarullah. And you see that organization in display downstairs. We just had a Shura election. Imam Azhar Hanif Sahib, who just underwent surgery, major hip surgery, still willed the way to conduct the election. He didn't have to, but he did. There's 186 delegates or so in there. Many volunteers who are doing the counting, and in one go, all of the math added up. We just went through a year of elections, and I know in LA we struggled with the vote counting and this, that. But what an organized system that Ansarullah had set up that so efficiently in 30, 35 minutes, the elections of Sadr Ansarullah and Sadr Ansar Saff Dom, Naib Sadr Saff Dom were completed. And that organizational power you see in Majlis Ansarullah. And you appreciate that more when you come to the Ijtima. Shared wisdom. I don't have to tell you anything after Habib Shafiq Saab's, talk. That's what shared wisdom is. His experiences, an African American at the Wagah border who's teaching us about the merits and the blessings of Wasiyat. It doesn't get more iconic than that in shared wisdom. The National Ijtima, and then we're the helpers. We should never forget that that's our description. That's our definition as Ansarullah, is that we're the helpers. So we should be helping our sisters. We should be helping the Lajna members who are facing depression. We should be kind to our wives. We're helpers. We should look out for the rishtas of those 30, 40-year-old women who aren't getting married because we're helpers. We should reach out to the khuddam who are engaged in drugs, and we're going to learn about that tomorrow, because we're ansar, we're helpers. It's our duty. We have to do tarbiyat to our children. It's in our constitution, atfal and nasrat. Why? Because we're helpers. At the end of the day, we are the helpers, and I'll show you our constitution here. This constitution, you know, if you take the constitution of Lajna, you take the constitution of Ansarullah, Khuddam, Atfal, and Nasrat, there are 5 constitutions that we have. And you put them all side by side, they're all different. There is so much wisdom in the way Jamaat has been set up and the structure, and how Hazrat Muslim anhu intended the specific job descriptions of each shoba, each nizam to be. And it's a good exercise. You should do it with your family. You should ask your wife, your daughter, or son, if you're blessed with children, to look at the constitutions and compare and contrast. And you'll realize that there's very specific descriptions that are in this room for us that you won't find upstairs, or in Tahir Academy where the children are, or in Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya. And what are those? I solemnly pledge that I shall endeavor throughout my life for the propagation and consolidation of Ahmadiyyat in Islam. 2 different tasks. Propagation is one, but consolidation is another, putting everything into one place. Again, when you get to that top of Half Dome, you've consolidated your entire journey, all the things that you learned along the way. You're a consolidator as a Majlis Ansarullah. That description of consolidation is not in any other shoba. And I shall stand guard in defense of the institution of Khilafat. That's a big deal as well. Guard doesn't necessarily mean standing guard outside, although it can. And Ansar are not exempt from doing physical duty at the gate. And if you're a member of Ansarullah, you should be in Jummah at the front gate and give your khadim a break. And you should be out there doing duty. Because guard doesn't say only metaphorical guard. No, it's physical guard as well. But it's also metaphorical guard. You should be that defender of Khilafat in every way. From the public, from people who threaten Khilafat Ahmadiyya, or for people who within the Jamaat sometimes question Khilafat. You have to be that guardian, that defense. I shall not hesitate to offer any sacrifice in this regard. Sacrifice is a common theme in everything, Ansar, Lajna, Khuddam, Atfal, and Nasrat. And I shall exhort my children to always remain dedicated and devoted to Khilafat. In my mind, there is a reason why this was put at the end. This is just my own interpretation. I haven't read this anywhere. I think if somebody asks me what's my most important responsibility now that I'm a member of Majlis Ansarullah, it's that last line, that I shall exhort my children to always remain dedicated and devoted to Khilafat. Why? Because they're the fetus right now. They're helpless. And we need them to mature and have a life of their own, right? We're the stewards of that fetus that's getting to that age of 40. Just like my father was sitting over there, and his father was, and his father was. That's just the way it is. That's the reality. So if the only take-home message I can give to you is to exhort your children to always remain dedicated and devoted to Khilafat. Teaching them Quran, teaching them Salat, Tahir Academy, Atfal, identity, all of those things are important, but nothing really matters if they don't have that love and respect and appreciation for what Khilafat Ahmadiyya is, because that's the only thing that makes them different from everyone else. You know, there's 1 billion Muslims in the world, but there's only a certain amount of Muslims who are bestowed with Khilafat, and that's the message that we have to give our children. And there's a reason why at age 40 we are given that responsibility, for the reasons that I mentioned. We can go to, I don't think there's any more slides, is that it? So that's all I have to say, and I'll open it up for, really I can't answer any questions for you because I don't feel like I'm in the capacity to answer questions. In fact, I think it would be more useful for the audience if people can share their own experiences. But I was talking to Salman Sajid of Virginia Jamaat. I don't know if Salman Bhai is in the audience over here. And Salman Bhai shared the story of his grandfather, Seth Aladdin Sahib. And he had an amazing lesson for us all. When he was around the age of 40 and he became a member of Ansarullah, he decided to do something very unique. In the dinner table inside of his house, underneath the table, he put a coffin there. He put a coffin under the dinner table. And the reason he did that is that when he had his family at the dinner table and he would start talking to them and he would sit at the table, every now and then his foot would hit the coffin. And it would be a reminder of where we're all ending up. We're ending up back to our Creator. And we've already read what Masih Maud said. is that we start going on that downhill, down half dome at age 40. So we're closer to our death than we are to our beginning. That's life, and that's not a bad thing. But we have to be reminded of that. So you have to figure out in your own life, how are you going to get that self-check that there's a coffin that's awaiting for you? How are you going to do that? Are you going to casually put your foot and hit it when you're at the dinner table? Maybe. That's probably the most effective way to do that. But if you don't look at the end, then how are you going to know how to make every day count in a spiritual way? Would you even think about missing salat if you realize that your maut, your end, could be coming any day now? So if you start thinking about the end rather than the beginning, about the destination, that transition down that mountain towards you need to go will be a lot smoother. And that's a lesson that I learned as well coming down Half Dome. And I know it sounds very ominous and it puts sort of a damper on things, but again, that's the reality. And so that example of his grandfather always stays in my heart, in my mind, and it's something that we should always reflect on, is that we're closer to the end than the beginning, all of us in this group. And so we should make every day count in the best way. And that's being good Ahmadi Muslims and teaching our children about Khilafat. So that's all I have to say. I don't know if we can start on the right side. If anybody has any comments or anything that they'd like to share, we can. I don't know how much time we have, but feel free. G.
Nothing about being Ansar or not, but your example of boiling water at 100 degrees and then the temperature not going up. That reminded me of my class 10th or 11th. That was like, 55 years ago or whatever it was. That this is a fact that when you boil water, it gets up to 100 degrees, starts boiling, and then for next some minutes, it starts changing the state from water to steam without change of temperature. So when it becomes steam, then the temperature again starts rising up. But for that moment, there's no rise in temperature, but there's only change of state, and that is called the latent heat. Yeah.
Jazakallah. Yeah.
I think the last statement you made here really is the clear message that we must understand the value of Khilafat. We know Khalifatul Masih, we all know that. We love him. But you have to go away outside the box and see around you, and you will find out that just like Brother Speak said, there are tons of popcorns, but they are all over with like chicken with their heads cut off. So Khilafat is such a blessing, and we must carry that message to our children and their children. My father used to tell me that those leaves which are adhered to the tree, they remain green. The moment they are away from the tree, they fall decay. So what does it mean? It means we have to establish a personal relationship with our Khalifa, each one of us, on a personal basis, because you will be surprised how you would be remembered by your Khalifa. I cannot spend hours I can spend to tell you the stories after stories after stories, which people tell me that how Hazrat Amirul Mu'mineen has touched this family in person. So I think this is such a blessing, and we have to carry that message not only in practice, but share it with our children.
Jazakallah. How many here are between age 40 and 45? Mahmood Khan, you're between 40 and 45? No, you.
Actually, I raised my hand first, but if you were
No,
asking
please,
for...
go ahead. We'd like to hear you.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. First of all, I commend your presentation. It's very nice, and I think you related your physical expedition with this Ansarullah and Khudam-ul-Am. It's great. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it too. But few things which I think we need to share it when we go back with the Khudam as well and with the elders. One thing which I noticed is that you mentioned that we need to sit in the company of elders. And I remember my old days when I sat in the company of one elder when I was a teenager, and I was massaging his feet. Hazrat Hafiz Mukhtar Ahmad Sahab Shah Jahanpuri Razi Allah Ta'ala Anhu. And I remember still one thing, on those hot days in Rabwa in May or June, when I was visiting him, and he was in his drawing room, and I was massaging his feet, and he said, we were talking, I don't know how the conversation started, but he said that I have told these people so many times that it is not Jalsa Salana, it is Salana Jalsa, but they don't correct that. So I understand what those Urdu-speaking people are, what he meant, that, but we are used to that Jalsa Salana. So these are the things really, some memories stuck to your mind and pay you for the rest of your life. So that's what I think Ahsan Khan Sahab was saying, that we need to share those memories with the elders as well as the youngers, not just the elders, but if we have these things, good memories, we can share with the Khuddam and Atfal as well. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Dr. Khalid Minhas, who just came back from Grand Bahama for medical relief. Jazakallah, Dr. Sahab.
Assalamu alaikum. I'll be 48 in a few days, and this is my first National Ansar Ijtima. And after listening to these two speeches or two presentations, I think it's already worth it. Jazakallah Habib Bhai, Jazakallah Ahsan Bhai. I'm a cardiologist by profession, and tomorrow we'll be presenting a health talk about prevention of cardiac disease. But it's a dichotomy that what I'm going to share with you is that you talked about the life and death and fear of dying. I always heard about dying is a bad thing. I lost my mother last year in March. And after that event, death is not a fear to me anymore, because this is actually a beautiful thing. And one day I was obviously very depressed, and I was with my son, and he said, "You're so depressed, why don't you ask Allah Mia to make you meet your mother again?" And I did that. And the same night, my mom came to my dream. And from that time onward, I always do 2 nafal at the end of my Isha prayer, just for the sake of my mother, so that I meet her. And this, because I always had seen her doing tahajjud, very regular from early childhood, from my childhood, that she was always regular. The experience this I'm sharing with Ansar brothers is that this is kind of a very weird thing, that this feeling that I had, that after that event, now I do these nawafil, and as if I'm living in this family of there's God, there's my mom, there's me, and there's my children, and there's a connection. So this life and life after death, I don't think that there's a gap in here. I think this is the continuity of that. We just have to realize that that this is the life that is taking us to another stage, and that stage is so beautiful and is set for us. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. And it's interesting you mention that, because in Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, this section about age 40 is followed by the section of what happens to us when we pass away. And I always tell my brothers, because an elder once told me this, is that whenever somebody passes away in the family dear to you, you offer your prayers, pray for the deceased, but read that chapter in Philosophy of the Teaching of Islam, because it's so comforting to know what the life after is going to be like. So that's very, Jazakallah for that insight. There was a hand up here. Brother Ray, did you have a hand up? No. Okay. Anybody else? G. Some elders look younger than others. MashaAllah.
Assalamu alaikum. I've never met Khalifa Tumasi II, but I just love this man dearly for the way that he's organized Jamaat in these different organizations, because these different organizations have gave me such an experience that is so pleasurable and made my time in Ahmadiyya very pleasurable, never boring. And just speaking of Caliphate, I had the pleasure of, in my early life, meeting Khalifa Tumasi III and working with him and met Khalifatul Masih IV before he became Khalifa, so we had a relationship. But the present Khalifa, well, I didn't really know him or have a relationship with him, but for some reason after he became the Khalifa, I mean, I just love the man dearly, and I've met him several times, and his personality, his concern for you and your family, just makes me want to work harder for Ahmadiyyat. But these organizations that he created has definitely brought an experience in our lives, and the way that he set those things up, I mean, Khalifatul Masih was just a genius. So.
Jazakallah Boka Sahib for sharing that. We have a question or a comment. I can bring it over there. You don't have to come. It's fine.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to share one of my personal experience about the last point of love for Khilafat and affiliations. It's 1957 or 1958. I was 13 years old, studying in Talim Islam High School. In 58, I believe, in our Jamaat history, a event happened what is known in the Jamaat literature as Fitna Manan Khilafat. Maulvi Abdul Manan Sahib was the elder son of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih first. So my father, who was also 70 years old, we became Ahmadi 4 years ago. My father came for Ansarullah Ijtima. Usually Ijtima takes place in the last week of October or November. And he said, tell me guys, and he was a Zimidar, simple, illiterate man. Yeah, what is Maulvi Manan says? And I want to meet him and show him that your father, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih the first, got Khilafat sitting in the feet and shoes of promised Messiah, Islam. So somebody told him, Mian Manan sits here in Darul Rahmat Wasti. So he said, Maulvi Manan, I've heard so many things about you that you are giving tough time to Khilafat and Hazrat Muslim Mahmaod and all. He said, no, Babaji, I don't do anything. But these are all allegations. My father said, go back to your father and see how he got the Khilafat. So on that Jalsa Ansarullah in 1958, this event, this talk reached Hazrat Muslim Mahmaod. In the final day of the third day of Jalsa of Ansarullah, Hazrat Muslim Mahmaod mentioned, Maulvi Manan should learn even from Baba Ghulam Muhammad Mangla, who has said that your father got Khilafat by sitting in the shoes of the promised Messiah. And you say that I haven't done anything? Go back and ask for forgiveness. It's in the recorded. And that's what I was 14 Atfal, and my father was 60, 70 years old. So affiliation with the Khilafat is an integral part of Ansarullah functions. Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah for sharing that. Jazakallah. Any other comments? Ji.
Alaikum. That's my early days when I was, I think, 14, 15 years. I write the letters to Khalifatul Masih Sani and write letter to Mirza Rafi Ahmad. So one time I write to Mirza Rafi Ahmad that I am coming to Rabwa and I want to meet you. And they send the letter back to me and they say, whenever you come Rabwa, you have first met Khalifatul Masih and then you have met somebody else. So that shows that how the Khilafat is important with any aspect.
Jazakallah for sharing that. Anyone else in the back or Mateen sir? No, you're good. Okay, I think if there's no other comments, I'll give it back to, sorry. No, it's all right.
रोशनी का सफर